right, guys, we are back again. We've got more OG crypto options market makers in the house. Shiliang Tang here from MNNC, ex-Arbalos, and FalconX now. And we've got Jimmy Yang of Orbit Markets. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. How we finding Dubai?
Hot.
Busy.
Yeah.
It feels a good vibe though.
No, everyone's excited. It's a great mood. Like markets solo this year, but everyone's in a great mood so far.
You guys have been in the space for a long time, right? And, arguably on the leading edge of this kind of vol market, right? So kind of big picture, crypto vols are on their knees relative to cross-asset vols. Is there like some monster supply out there that's suppressing these vols, or is it just a function of lower realized because crypto's kind of maturing as an asset, Bitcoin's behaving like a bit of a shapeshifter, and sometimes correlated to stocks, sometimes correlated to gold, hence that's dampening the realized vol a little bit. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of crypto becoming a matured asset. I think that's definitely true. Like we've seen now the vol is like really low, and out there we've seen a lot of sellers of vol as well. But this is actually true in traditional market. I previously traded FX options at Deutsche Bank. Yeah. In crypto, we've seen a lot of structured product supplies, and structurally markets getting supply from all these volatilities. And but ultimately, the market is now moving these days, right? Which is, I think, is actually not.
Is it not moving because the vol supply is coming? And
I don't think the size of this supply is big enough to have this impact on gamma on the spot market, for example. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. Now it's just really a lag of interest.
I've heard mixed views on that, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a lag of interest. Really, it's not a great sign for now, I have to say. But hopefully there will be some catalysts. I think right now market is looking for catalysts, right? And the last catalyst was like the Bitcoin reserve, for example, but that was already gone. And then we have all the tariffs, chaos and stuff. But now market is looking for the next catalyst. And Bitcoin has been like stuck in this area for quite a long time. The realized vol hasn't picked up. In a way, it's good because that means that Bitcoin is quite stable as an asset, but at the same time, it's trying to trade sometimes with tech stocks. It collapsed a bit, but then also it follows the currencies or gold. It doesn't collapse as much. So it's kind of, there are two driving forces. One is like with the tech stocks, one is with currencies and gold. That actually, in the end, the result is that it's not moving, and the vol is at the bottom.
And generally, like when assets don't move, like it frustrates market makers because market makers tend to lean long vol, right? That's kind of bread and butter what you do, right? You lean long vol, try and finance it with the two-way flow, the bid offer spread that you capture, and then when the move comes, that's where you make your money, right?
Right.
So right now, I'd imagine you guys are getting quite frustrated. So how do you kind of cope with that? How do you kind of stop the books bleeding when you're sitting long vol and the market's not doing anything? Have you got any techniques that you use? Do you use like zero DTE selling to kind of just fund it in the short term? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like just, take a step back to the previous question, like, alts are still moving, right? I think Bitcoin may be more range bound, but like alts are very volatile. It's more correlated to like tech stocks and equity markets are moving. And so there's actually a lot of activity in alts in general, right? And in terms of like supply, like implied, realized, I think there is a lot of supply hitting implied vols, right? And so I think that makes a difference. But from a realized vol perspective, I think matters less so, right? I think that's more from like supply demand of like actual spot markets. Sure, it's like it was correlated to like macro markets, but like you have Sayer and others that are stepping in to buy, and that kind of dampens like the fall, and eventually the fast money was washed out very early on. That fast money was more correlated to traditional financial markets for liquidity purposes. And once that was washed out, I think the longer term money of like Sayer and others basically, stepped in. And that's why it kind of like decoupled. That's my opinion, right? In terms of like the current environment for Bitcoin, I think it is tough, right? I think, it's been very range bound. You get like one-off large moves, right? When it kind of like range breakouts on the downside, upside, and then it kind of just flatlined for like the next like week or a couple of weeks, right? So you try to do some like intraday scalping. You try to do like some relative value trades, right? Maybe like, Ethereum is trading at a higher vol, OTC markets, Solana, et cetera, trading at higher vols. But you do see opportunistically some like macro fund buyers as well, like the upside. I think people are getting a little more positive in the past couple of weeks, right? So we have seen
all that buying flow.
Yeah, we have seen some demand.
What were they buying? What?
So buying like April to June upside, like chasing it higher. Basically, once we popped above 90k, it felt like a trigger. But you know the interesting thing there though, call buys came in, but the vol didn't really react.
Yeah,
'Cause there was a lot of rolling going on and stuff like that. So I mean, where do you see the inflection point in spot vol correlation? Because call skews come back, right? Generally, the skew is like a leading indicator of like what the spot vol correlation is going to be. Yeah. And so, what level in Bitcoin to the upside do we need to break for vol to catch a bid on the way up? Do you reckon?
I probably gotta get at least above 100k. Yeah,
Probably new highs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 110k or something. Man. Yeah. I think that's a good trade, like owning that upside. Because it's got a little cool premium, but it's not gone crazy, right?
No, it hasn't.
If you break 110, opens up the door to like 130, vol's catching a bid, I would have thought, right?
Yeah.
Although the problem with those vol bids, for those of you who trade crypto bot, it's like you blink and you miss the spike. Like the front end spikes,
right.
but if you don't capitalize and sell it
it's
like a day, you miss it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the trade's been more to not try and time the spikes, but actually just lay into like the spikes themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that your preferred bias on the short side of vol?
Not usually, but it's been the trade to do, outside of the election time period, that's been the trade to do.
Yeah, and I think it definitely, in crypto, when there's a big hype around an event and the vol goes bid into an event, the hit ratio of selling the vol on that event has just been exceptional. Yeah. It's always a disappointment, that event, right?
Exactly.
You know?
Especially when you got Trump promising to make big announcements, and then it's like...
Yeah. Hypes it up, hypes out there. Yeah, you already knew what I was going to say.
Right. Yeah. But so, do you see new highs coming in Bitcoin? Is that the view?
Actually, before we came here, I was just saying that I don't like this type of questions, like the prediction. Like, I honestly don't.
I think
but I saw this question coming anyway, so
There's so many people making wild predictions about $1 million by 2028 and stuff now, right?
It's interesting to me.
Predictions as well.
Yeah, and yeah.
But I do like making bets against Dave because I seem to be all right at winning those bets.
That's a short-term trader mentality.
Yeah.
But no, it does feel like we've kind of gone, like, obviously there's all this hope and excitement around Trump coming in, and everyone's putting silly levels on it, and we've kind of flipped back the other way now, so everyone's kind of almost given up on it, and there's almost like a despondency. So for me, he's always kind of interesting, right? It probably means that sentiment shift. We probably do have a decent move the other way, but we'll see how that.
I think now the hope is that Bitcoin starts to behave like gold, right? I think that would be probably the next catalyst. And if all these tariff thing or the geopolitical and macro uncertainty continue to rise, then maybe at some point people realize you can't just put all your money in gold. There's nothing else to invest right now.
The problem I'm worried about gold because on my way over to Dubai, I was at the airport and a nice little old lady told me I should buy some gold while I'm out here. And when it becomes that mainstream, that random little old ladies on the street are telling you to buy gold.
That's not a good sign.
That's not a good sign.
That's not a good sign.
The point you make about maybe people switching some of it.
You don't need much.
Yeah, and also it's like,
you just need a little bit.
It's the central banks, right? China's buying gold. If a central bank decides to invest a little bit into Bitcoin, that's a huge incremental flow that comes, right?
Sure.
So that's still definitely in our future.
Yeah. And that maybe creates the start of some momentum, and then people will follow. And you just basically need people.
I told the old lady to buy Bitcoin instead.
Yeah, probably. But at the same time, I feel like outside Bitcoin, I must say the rest of the crypto landscape right now doesn't look great.
No.
Yeah. So like all the altcoins, they are going nowhere, right? So that could be like a drag on the overall crypto sentiment as well, right? So that's the negative factor.
I'm praying that the crypto regulation that comes out of the US now that the Trump administration have put in these different people in important positions, that's going to help the old space. But we're all still waiting for that, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing to be seen there.
Nothing concrete so far.
Flip side of that, like regulatory clarity or deregulation, whatever you want to call it, it does like open the floodgates for traditional players, more competition, like for firms like us, right? Like now that everyone kind of feel comfortable getting into the space, Citadel is getting this, like, coming back and all these other prop firms are scaling up. It does mean edge probably compresses also, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, edge for trading maybe, yeah, but like for the general sort of bullishness of the market.
Of course, that's great. Yeah.
For the retail side of things, the alts have underperformed so much. Dominance on Bitcoin is so high that that is probably the next trade, but it's just hard times.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and everyone keeps trying to play that trade, right? And it just
really ETFs. I mean, who knows? But like, Solana's going to get an ETF probably pretty soon, right? So,
yeah.
Hopefully that brings something to
Are you venturing more in CL space?
I think eventually we have to, right?
Yeah.
A lot of capital sits in traditional markets. It's great distribution, so like a retail, right? And so eventually, if Robinhood starts listing aggressively all these different assets, there's a lot of retail capital that probably prefer to just trade a Robinhood as opposed to like migrate into crypto. And so we probably have to engage with traditional assets and rails too, right? So,
yeah.
Was the liquidity improving much in the altcoin option space, or is that still quite a long way to go?
I think right now, like the liquidity it's still not so much on the exchanges, right? So most of it is in the OTC space.
Yeah.
But there is a strong institutional demand for altcoins. Why? Because foundations have so much of the altcoins on their balance sheet, right? And they are probably the richest players in the crypto space. They're much bigger than many of the funds. If you look at their balance sheet, so that there's a demand for hedging, right?
Yeah.
And then you have VCs, all the big VCs. They have a lot of altcoins in their book as well. They also need derivatives and maybe options for hedging purposes.
Does that mean altcoin skew trades really, really expensive for puts then?
As in they will be mostly selling calls and buying puts. You are right. Yeah. So that's what we see in the funding rates market as well, because some of the altcoins have very negative funding rates. That's exactly because of all the hedging flows coming from the foundations and the VC players,
so
right?
Altcoins have negative funding rates, but like the big boys like Bitcoin and ETH still have positive ones, right?
Yeah. So funding rates the skew usually is in the same direction, just like in traditional assets as well, right?
Interesting.
So that's why I think there's a lot of natural demand for altcoin derivatives and options, but whether we are going to make it standard listed instruments on exchange, probably not, because most of these trades will be bespoke trades, right? It's like a customized hedging solution for these
kind of like corporate derivatives.
Exactly, that's exactly like corporate derivatives. So foundations are the corporate in crypto.
Interesting,
right? So that's how I view it. And so we are here, we are specializing OTC, altcoins, options, and structured products. So we are actually designing all these or customize all these corporate treasury products exactly for these corporates.
And then how do you go about hedging those? It must be quite challenging.
Yeah, so you have to hedge on the portfolio level. Obviously, there's not much natural liquidity out there. But then once you start to have a lot of tokens in the book, you have this diversification effect.
Yeah.
You have different flows from different type of clients. You have corporate, but also you have hedge funds on the other side, just like at banks with like hedge fund and corporate, right? So I think you need a bit of scale. So if you only have one altcoin in your book, you're not going to make it. But if you start to have 30, 40, 50, and in different directions with different clients, you start to be able to manage on the portfolio level, right? And the residual risk, you try to internalize, obviously, and the residual risk, you hedge with liquid instruments like BTC options, ETH options, Solana options.
Okay. Amazing, guys. I think we're going to call it a day so we don't all melt out here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah, always interesting to get your thoughts, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
I appreciate the chat. It's really good. Thanks.